DawgNation, and welcome to DawgNation at Large. I'm Kaylee Mansell with DawgNation insider Connor Riley. Connor, unfortunately, Brat's summer is coming to an end. What are we going to be for the fall?
We already know the answer to this. It's demur autumn.
Okay, I just now saw this for the first time today. I'm not going to lie, because of Pookie. If you guys are familiar with Pookie and Jet, she made a post about this. What does that mean? That's outside of my vocabulary.
Demur, quiet, shy, thoughtful, introspective, essentially a polar opposite to Brat Summer.
Oh, I don't know if I'm capable of being that.
Some would say you weren't capable of being Brat Summer either.
I don't know. I'm a little honest, a little blunt, maybe sometimes a little bit volatile. I would definitely consider. How am I supposed to take you seriously when you do stuff like that? It's not very Brat of you. All right, I've seen enough. Let's go ahead. Let's cut. It's the end of Brat Summer here on DawgNation at Large.
It's the show for the new breed of Georgia Bulldog fan. This is DawgNation at Large with DawgNation insiders Connor Riley and Kaylee Mansell.
All right, DawgNation. This is DawgNation at Large, the only show on the DawgNation platform where you can see Connor do, I don't want to call it dance moves. I don't know if you call it that. It was hand motions. But more importantly, we're going to talk some Georgia football today. Here's what we've got going on today's episode of DawgNation at Large, starting with a preview of UGA's second scrimmage, which will take place on Saturday. Then Kirby Smart pulled out this big word, deterioration, and I think the media and fans were freaking out about it. What does that mean? Does UGA really lack depth? More on that later. Then we're also going to do another segment of Dog Bites. We've got a lot of things to talk about, and then we're going to wrap up with a new segment that we like to call Spilling the G. Maybe a little wordplay on spilling the tea, but it's the G because we love the goss here on this show. But we want to start with this. UGA's second scrimmage will take place on Saturday. Kirby Smart wasn't too happy about the way that things went down in the first scrimmage, but is hopeful for this next one coming up on Saturday. Here's what Kirby Smart had to say about it.
Progress has been good. Wouldn't say that the first scrimmage was really up to the standard or our expectations. We did not have a lot of enthusiasm, didn't play to the level that I think we need to play to. But good news is they got another chance this Saturday and really every day to go out and practice.
All right, Connor, let's be real here about one thing. Is there any world that exists where Kirby Smart is actually satisfied with how the first scrimmage goes?
No, he's never happy this time of year. This is the antithesis of his Christmas. It is the least happy time of year for Kirby Smart because mostly Georgia's focusing on themselves, and we're going to get into this a little bit later, but like he sees this team every day, and he has past comparisons now to championship level teams, 2021 and 2022. And unfortunately, the comparison is the thief of joy. And I think he sees that in comparison to those past championship teams, maybe this Georgia team isn't quite on the same level as those teams were.
I feel like in practice one, you just want to make sure that you have the fundamentals and the basics laid out and that you can tackle the heat. But when you go into the second scrimmage, what are those details that you're looking for, not just the things you want to get out of the way in scrimmage one?
You want to see certain playmakers, I think, on both sides of the football really take advantage of the opportunity. These games these scrimmages rather, are played in Sanford Stadium, and it's as close to a game atmosphere as Georgia's going to get prior to that opener against Clemson. And even I think the intensity there is going to be greater than it will be in some of Georgia's games this season. And so for a program that likes to say that practice is harder than the games, these should be the hardest games, so to speak, of the season. You want to see which players are able to fight through the pain, the bumps and the bruises, able to fight through the heat, because it is going to be hotter today, certainly than it will be when Georgia opens in a dome stadium against Clemson on August 31st. And who can sort of go out there and make the plays that inspires Kirby Smart to trust them when Georgia opens the season in a few weeks.
When you say playmakers, who do you expect to see more progress out of from scrimmage one to scrimmage two? Is it the veterans who have been there and know what to expect out of this, or is it the younger players who probably have more room for improvement from scrimmage one to scrimmage two?
I actually think on the offensive side of the ball, it is the veterans. It's guys like Dominic Lovett, Dylan Bell. We'll count Trevor Etienne as a veteran, so to speak, because it is his third year of college football there. Those types of guys, I think if you see them continue to go out and play well and make plays, you could say the same on the defensive side of the ball with a guy like, say, a Dalen Everett, or, at this point, a Raylan Wilson is considered a veteran on this defense because of how much newness they have on that side of the ball. I do think that Kirby's going to feel a lot better about this team. Obviously, again, depth is such a big concern for him right now. And so I understand you want to see certain freshmen like, say, a Nate Frazier or a KJ Bolden go out there and have really strong Saturday afternoons. But for this team, for Clemson game 1, I actually think it's the veterans that need to go out there and show and inspire some confidence in Kirby Smart.
Okay, let me ask you this. How realistic are the scrimmages? Like, I know you want to prevent injury, but you also want to prepare them for the game 1 opener. Is it very game-like, or is there some restriction on it?
I think it's as close to a game as you're going to get from Georgia. Obviously, you can't hit the quarterbacks there, but they want these things to be physical. They want you to go 100% and give all that you can, and that's tough. Because the time of year, because you're going through camp, up until yesterday when school started for Georgia, they've been practicing almost every single day. And so they get to the end of this camp period, Saturdays, in Kirby's mind, the last period of fall camp. These guys are tired. They're pushing their bodies harder than they're going to during the season. And I think if they're able to push and strain through that, a word that you're going to hear Kirby Smart use a lot this season, I think he's going to be further encouraged by what he sees. And ultimately, I think feel better than he did on Tuesday about where this team is going into the 2024 season.
So when all is said and done, what players and storylines are you hoping to write about on Sunday or Monday by the time scrimmage 2 is over?
I think Trevor Etienne is a big name we'd like to hear more from. Obviously, you hear the good news about Nate Frazier coming out of scrimmage run. Branson Robinson has been a consistent positive story here for Georgia, but maybe a little bit under the radar right now. Not weather. He's not sick. Roger Robertson's dealing with a little bit of a toe injury, and there's some question about how healthy he's going to be. And so the presence of Trevor Etienne being a leader in that running back room, I think is something that I'd like to hear and see from this Georgia scrimmage. On the defensive side of the ball, it's that cornerback battle opposite Dalen Everett. I think Dalen Everett is going to be one of Georgia's starters at the cornerback position there. Who steps up between Daniel Harris and Julio Humphrey? It sounds like Humphrey got more reps in the first scrimmage with the first team. Does Georgia maybe go out there and play Daniel Harris? I expect them to play both, but it'd be really encouraging for Georgia if you hear one of those two guys has a strong day, because I think that makes you feel all a bit better about what Georgia potentially has in its secondary.
Moving on, Kirby pulled out. Did you ever have sight words growing up? Like when you're like 4th or 5th grade, you have the sight words. It's like a list of fancy words that you have to learn. Well, anyway, when I heard Kirby Smart use the phrase deterioration, I immediately thought of a sight word. Like, good for him, honestly. And he used it almost to describe the lack of depth that they have now. We're going to replay it for you.
We got a long way to go as a football team. We are nowhere near where we're close to where we need to be. I feel like we have less depth than we've ever had, and that's kind of a common theme talking to other coaches I talk to. I call it the deterioration of football, because every year we've been here, I feel like we've had more players capable of going in and play winning football, and every year that goes down. So we've got to keep working to increase that number.
So I think if you hear only this part of the clip, immediately your fingers point to, oh, he's talking about the transfer portal. It's easy to assume that. But, however, our own Connor Riley followed up on what Kirby had to say. So I want you guys to listen to his follow-up so we can have a better understanding of exactly what he meant by the deterioration of college football.
Yeah, I don't know if it's transfer portal or the deterioration of football. Could be less people playing. High schools not having as much of an opportunity to develop kids because their practice regimen and practice schedule is tougher. It's a trickle up effect. So we get the guys coming from the high school level, but do we have the same number of players? So you can't blame the transfer portal for that. I think we lose some continuity in terms of guys that have been in the program multiple years. Therefore, your next statement of making it easier for a younger player to play, I don't know if that's any easier because he's up against guys that come out of the portal, but we have less guys that know and execute our system. And we're not even really considered a portal team. I mean, I don't know how many we've averaged over the last 4 years. I can't imagine it's even double digits. I mean, we don't have many guys coming from that. So, but it's not as much quality depth that I'm used to, but we probably have more than a lot of people.
First off, let me give you some snaps here for your follow-up question, because I feel like if that wouldn't have been said, a lot of miscommunication would have been involved based on just the first thing that he said. So nice journalism work on getting him to follow up on that. What did you initially make of the comment as a whole?
Yeah, I think it's easy when you see that first clip to assume he's talking about the transfer portal. And I went back and wrote about this on DawgNation on Thursday morning, doing some of the numbers and digging into it. I understand his point of view when it comes to just the lesser participation in high school sports. We know that's an issue in California. We know that's an issue in the northeastern part of the United States. But I think in Georgia's recruiting footprint, it is not necessarily as drastic as it is in other areas. I think the main thing that Kirby is talking about here, and he's not anti-transfer portal, but on this Georgia 85-man scholarship roster, they only have 27 players that are in their third year or more, seniors, fifth-year seniors, sixth-year seniors, et cetera. And that's just a very young roster, not so much in terms of overall age. They do have guys like, say, Dominic Lovett in his second year as a transfer here. But in terms of just institutional knowledge, in terms of knowing the way that things are done, in terms of battle scars picked up from past games and what it was like, say, in the locker room against Ohio State or that 2021 loss to Alabama there, and that drain on institutional knowledge, that does impact Georgia more than I think it does a lot of other programs out there, especially those at the top. I think is what Kirby Smart gets frustrated. And in terms of the number of transfers that they brought in the previous 3 cycles, Georgia brought in a grand total of 6 transfers from the transfer portal that were scholarship players. One of those, Smoke Bowie, never even made it onto the fall practice roster. This offseason alone, they bring in 9. So I think Georgia very clearly sees a shift in the way that college football is going. And they recognize that, hey, we have to be more active in the transfer portal to at least try and maintain and build our depth in some regard. I think that you look at an example of, say, Georgia adding London Humphreys on the offensive side of the ball or Colin Gill from Oregon on the defensive side of the ball, guys that have multiple years of eligibility remaining. I think those are the types of players going forward Georgia's going to be more and more active for. Yes, you're going to see them take some one-year guys like at wide receiver this year, but more often than not, I think Georgia now recognizes just the fact they're always going to be operating at a deficit when it comes to the transfer portal. They now have to be proactive in building depth through the transfer portal. And I don't believe that they were necessarily doing that a few years ago, in large part because they didn't have to. But when you're losing 21 guys a year, which is what Georgia lost off of last year's team, you can understand where I think Kirby Smart is coming from with his stance and specifically with his trumped up phrase of deterioration of football.
Yeah, immediately when I heard this, I thought to myself, okay, if Kirby Smart is saying this team that is preseason number 1 for everywhere has no depth, then there must be no hope for anyone else, right? But I think you make a fair point that moving forward, you're going to have to embrace the transfer portal more. Now, I would rather go quality over quantity and have fewer people that are a lot better than a lot of people that are basically nothing. But how does this affect the players that come in from high school if they continue to take more towards the transfer portal route? How does that affect not only how many people they take in from the incoming classes, but how much playing time they get too?
Well, I think you can look at what Georgia did in this last recruiting cycle. I believe 28 high school recruits coming in. They're still going to want to build their team through the transfer portal. I think they also have an understanding that there are going to be guys in this 2024 class that will not be here this time next year. You saw guys like Joshua Miller, AJ Harris, Zeke Haynes, all transfer out of the program after just 1 season. And so Georgia, and they've been doing this for a while, they're going to be more diligent and try and figure out guys who are going to be long-term culture fits with this program. But I also think there's a part of Kirby Smart that was maybe perhaps complaining about the lack of leadership at a national level when it comes to college football. I think he is saying that the sport is worse off because of the way that it currently is. And he would like to see it get back to where you did have teams, say LSU in 2019, Georgia in 2021, Alabama in 2020, where the nucleuses of those teams were kept together for a while and built into special teams. I think that Kirby Smart's depth comments this year are a recognition of you're just not going to see this type of team, this type of program that you saw at places like Georgia, LSU, Alabama anymore. And it's going to be a lot more one-offs going forward.
I mean, is that even, like you said, that feels impossible. It doesn't feel feasible at this point. But it is important to note that I think in the first quote we listened to, he said that him and other coaches have talked about this. So clearly it's not just a Georgia issue, it's a nationwide issue.
Right, and I think that's where Kirby's frustrations about the state of college football really come through. He's been very, I think, diplomatic and political about the way he's answered questions about the state of college football. And I actually think that this is perhaps the closest he's gotten to voicing some of his frustrations with the way that the game has changed. And look, Georgia's going to handle this better than anybody. And so I understand why there are people out there saying, oh, that these are fake tears or crocodile tears, that he's crying. But I do think that Kirby Smart is legitimately worried about the direction of football. And that's why the usage of his phrase deterioration of football, I don't think is incidental.
So in just a moment, we've got a lot to break down in our Dog Bite segment. But first, our DawgNation invasion with Clemson is coming up. Here's how you can join us on that weekend. Here at DawgNation, we know there is nothing better than Georgia's first game, especially when it's an opponent like Clemson. But as someone who's lived in Atlanta for the last 6 years, I know that getting to Atlanta can be a hassle. Whether it's hotel, parking, or traffic, it's a pain, and that's the last thing we want you to worry about for the opener. So DawgNation is here to help, along with our partners at Discover Dum Woody. If you've got tickets to the game, Discover Dum Woody will take care of everything else. Their VIP package includes one night at the Hyatt Place Perimeter, luxury round-trip transportation to the DawgNation tailgate, and a one-of-a-kind swag bag that includes an exclusive DawgNation Invasion t-shirt. So let Discover Dum Woody get you to the big game and back in style. For a stress-free weekend, you can register at atlsportstrips.com. Again, that's atlsportstrips.com. For real, y'all make sure to check out Discover Dum Woody so y'all can join us on the DawgNation invasion that is quickly approaching. I mean, we're going to blink, and it's going to be August 31st, so we hope to see all of you there. But we've got a lot of stuff to break down, so it's time for some Dog Bites. The music, first off, is giving very much Brat Summer, Chapel Roan, all the things that Connor and I consumed over the last 2 months. But let's go ahead and start with this. The outside linebacker position. I'll go ahead and throw out the Jalen Walker mention so Connor doesn't have to, even though he's going to be a lot in the inside linebacker spot. Let's just go ahead and knock it off the bingo card. More than 5 players taking reps at the outside linebacker position. How do you get the most out of this group?
Yeah, I think that's a problem that Georgia is trying to solve this fall. I think they recognize that they just didn't get nearly enough out of that outside linebacker position a season ago. I think that's why you've seen the much talked about move of Michael Williams out there. I think it was interesting this week that Jalen Walker brought up that he's still taking a good amount of reps at that outside linebacker position, even with Small London being limited this fall. I think it's a clear sign that Georgia still has big plans for Jalen Walker at that outside linebacker position, what they're going to do with him. But I think the biggest news, in addition to Chess Jamlis dealing with a little bit of a hamstring injury right now, is Kirby Smart praising Damon Wilson and specifically talking about how he went and has improved his body. I don't know if there's a player on this Georgia team that did more to change their body than Damon Wilson this offseason. And you see it with the way Kirby Smart talks about how he can help this team on first and second down. I think we all know that Damon Wilson can be an impact pass rusher. But if he's able to be out there for Georgia on first down and second down and be a consistent threat against the run and do a good job of holding Georgia up in that regard, I think that's going to really unlock some reps for him, and his potential as a player is going to soar through the roof. And so there were some guys coming into this fall camp that I think we were interested on. Where are they, especially going into their second year? It sounds like Damon Wilson has made major strides both off the field in the weight room and on the field as well, and is in a position, I think, to really help this team this year.
Now that we've learned a little more, do you still stand by the fact that you think the linebacker position group is the strongest one Georgia has?
I do. I think that when they get Smallwood and healthy, when they do play Jalen Walker there, and then you factor in what you're going to see out of C.J. Allen and Raylan Wilson this year, I think this group is both deep and talented. And I think the biggest thing, it's just not quite as young as it was a season ago, where yes, you had Small London, you had Jamon Dumas Johnson as junior, Xavier Sorter there a little bit as well. but behind them, there was no sort of middle class that you were able to lean back on. CJ, Raylan, Troy Bowles were all freshmen. This year, you do have more veteran players in that room. You have Jalen Walker in there on a more prominent basis, along with CJ, Raylan, and Troy again. And you also bring in another star-studded crop of freshmen with guys like Justin Williams and Chris Cole.
All right. Speaking of Justin Williams and Chris Cole, let's do some newbie talk here. New kids on the block, whatever you want to call them, just had their first day of school. I think that's been one of my favorite parts about preseason, summer camp, fall camp is getting to finally hear buzz about the freshmen, considering they were the top-ranked class in 2024. So finally getting a glimpse into who they are and how they play has been really exciting. Now, to all surprises, Nate Frazier has seemed to be the darling of this group, the one that we've heard the most about. And I think that going into it with him not coming until the summer, we really didn't hear that much about him, and so much noise around Trevor Etienne, Roger Robinson. I don't think that we were expecting a running back to be the one that made headlines, but apart from Nate Frazier, because he's gotten all the love, who's the other freshman coming out of fall camp that has made the most noise?
Yeah, I think KJ Bolden is still the name to know here.
Yeah.
Obviously, it's cooled a little bit in recent weeks. I know Sokovi White is a favorite of yours. North Georgia roots up there from Cass High School. I think those are probably still the two guys that maybe are best positioned right now to try and make an impact on this team. Obviously, I mentioned Chris Cole and Justin Williams earlier. I think those guys are going to help out on special teams. I am interested in seeing what we see out of two defensive linemen, Joseph Jonah Ajanye and Jordan Thomas. It sounds like of the defensive linemen that Georgia brought in, those guys are perhaps closest to seeing the field. And with some of the injuries that they've dealt with there, maybe you find 10 snaps for them in that opener against Clemson. But right now, Nate Frazier, I think, is the big talking point coming out of the first scrimmage. KJ Bolden is still... Go ahead.
Are you surprised with how little we've heard about Ellis Robinson? Or do you think Kirby's just trying to keep it under wraps?
No, because, part of it is I think the depth in that cornerback room where you have Dalen Everett, who's had a really strong camp. And just the reality is Julio Humphrey's in his third year in the program. Daniel Harris is ahead of him as well. While Ellis is a phenomenal player and a phenomenal prospect, I think it was always going to be a tough ladder for him to climb to get over those guys. And you were going to need multiple of them to play poorly, because I have no doubt about Ellis Robinson and what he's been able to do for Georgia this fall. But it sounds like Daniel Harris, Julio Humphrey, guys who flirted with going elsewhere, them coming back, I think really prevented Ellis from having the role that maybe some people thought the number 2 overall prospect in the 2024 class could potentially have right away.
Also, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off there. Usually when I do it, it's on purpose, but I promise that one was on accident. So my bad, Connor. Moving on, UGA has 4 players named to preseason All-American teams. First team being Carson Beck, Tate Ratledge, Malachi Starks, and then Michael Williams being on the second team. I believe Georgia ties the second most, with Alabama and Michigan, only Ohio State having more across the board. By the time this is all said and done and the lists are over, do you think there will be another name added to this group?
I do. I think Dylan Fairchild is a name to watch there with what he can do. It wouldn't surprise me if CJ Allen finds his way on there, because I think when Smile comes back fully healthy, CJ is going to play next to him, and I think CJ Allen is going to have a really big season there. But I think it's Dylan Fairchild on the offensive side of the ball. As Georgia tries to figure out the interior of its offensive line, I think Dylan is a guy that is locked into a starting spot there. And then on the defensive side of the ball, I do think it's going to be one of those linebackers that we're talking about at the end of the season, in addition to Malachi Starks in the secondary and Michael Williams coming off the edge.
It's still just wild to me that we even have a quarterback that's first team preseason All-American in the first place, considering the fact that he's only Georgia good. Internal victory. All right, we're going to move on to this. This, you could call it old news, but Connor and I have not had the chance to conversate about this yet, and this is something that I'm very passionate about. And I know the title might be a little bit misleading, but Jim Harbaugh was scheduled to be an honorary captain for Michigan's first game, but he backed away, saying that he doesn't want to leave the Chargers ahead of his first season with them. Seems a little fishy to me, Connor. I just don't know, especially considering that the sanctions have come out, and it was basically, I wouldn't even call it a slap on the wrist. It was like a little tap. Don't do that again. This whole situation, I don't even feel like this is it. I feel like we're just going to find out more and more and more. And so Jim Harbaugh will not be making an appearance as Michigan's honorary captain in Game 1.
I'm sure he'll be back in Ann Arbor at some point to honor what he did there. Again, Kaylee, you might not be young enough or old enough, to remember this, but Michigan was in a real tough place before Harbaugh got there. Did, I think, a great job turning around that program. Obviously, has dealt with some sanctions there. They got in a lot of trouble for recruiting during COVID, where some of this stems from, and obviously there's further fallout from the Connor Stallion situation a season ago. But I think right now, just because of the sanctions coming out, him getting, I believe, a 4-year show cause penalty, just made it too hot for him to go up there to Ann Arbor in the middle of August. But I do have a question for you, Kaylee.
Sure.
The headline that we use for this is "No Captain, My Captain." Have you seen the movie that is from?
Is it the Dead Poet Society?
It is the Dead Poet Society. Have you seen the movie?
Yes. I think we had to watch it in class.
Who's the lead actor in it?
It's Robin Williams.
Okay.
Come again. You got any more? That's what I thought.
Yeah, who are some of the young actors in this? Because it is a loaded young actor
Ethan
class.
Hawke, Josh Arnett, right?
Josh Charles.
Oh, never mind. I just had a lot of Josh Arnett on my TikTok lately. I think we can go ahead and move on from this. I'm gonna quit while I'm out ahead. All right, we've had it's NFL preseason. It's not college football, but I'll take it for now. I'm not gonna lie, I did watch some NFL preseason on Sunday. Some dogs out there. Got to watch Brock Bowers play, made 2 catches for 25 yards, and then Stetson Bennett, 4 interceptions, game-winning touchdown. Still manages to get the job done. I'll take that as a W.
It's the most Stetson line of all time when he throws 4 interceptions. And the Rams quarterback situation right now with Matt Stafford dealing with a little bit of a hamstring injury and Jimmy Garoppolo suspended for the first 2 games. But Stetson found a way to deliver late. Sean McVay fired up that he was able to play through some of the adversity. Obviously, some of it self-inflicted there. But Stetson's going to keep playing, keep grinding. At the least, he's going to be on the Rams practice roster, I think, for most of the season. And really, again, just the fact that Stetson is out there playing, given, I think, all that he went through off the field last season. Throwing 4 interceptions is tough, but the ability of him in that game to bounce back, I think shows that, again, we still have not exactly heard the last of Stetson Bennett playing football.
Well, speaking of dogs in the NFL, in just a moment, we're going to talk about another dog in the NFL who made some comments on a certain podcast that, quite frankly, we just need to talk a little bit more about. But first, let me remind you guys that we are so excited to announce our new partnership with Zagoria Law. Dog bites. Zagoria Law. It literally, 2 things could not go better together. They are the only law firm in the state that specializes in representing people bitten by dogs. Yes, you heard me correct. The official dog bite injury lawyers of the Georgia Bulldogs. They literally wrote the book on how to win these cases. So if you or a loved one has been hurt by someone else's dog, give them a call at 833-GADOGBITE. That's 833-GADOGBITE. Or visit ZagoriaLaw.com. So excited to have them as a part of DawgNation and sponsor our Dog Bite segment. Again, it literally could not be any more perfect. Connor, Riley, and I, there's no secret that we are lovers of the goss, the tea. We spill it a lot. So this is our new segment, Spilling the G. I would probably say that that's pretty brat, maybe not so demure. Is that right? Demure?
Boy, you are just not ready for this fall.
I'm not. I'm just trying to get through today, if we're being totally honest. But that intro that was put together by the lovely Cody Chapins, who could not be here with us today, he put it together, and I would like to think that is very brat of us. So this is going to be Spilling the G. Matt Stafford said that he thought that it was discomforting when people barked at him. I believe that we have the clip. Here is Matt Stafford.
You call the dogs?
Do I call the dogs?
Yeah. Can
No.
you
This is a fan.
like a
disconnect. Yeah, where
Georgia thing?
They
Yeah.
call in all the dogs. They start barking at people.
Oh, yeah. You know what? I actually get wildly uncomfortable when people, bark at me or be like,
Yeah.
I'll be walking
Oh,
down the
really?
street like, go dogs. And I'm like, yeah. I don't ever give them the go dogs back. It just doesn't sit right with me.
Yeah,
I don't know why.
First off, Matt Stafford's veneers, not brat. Not brat at all. It had to be.
Come on now.
It had to be.
Come on now. That's not cool.
Hey, look, he's a DGD, but
Okay, so you do think he's a DGD, because there were a lot of people after this who thought and were claiming that he was not a DGD in that regard.
No. I mean, when you look at the numbers, you look at what he did for the program. I think that's DGD material. Now, I didn't go to Georgia, but I also don't bark back, because when I bark, I sound like a chihuahua, and I could see why it would make certain people uncomfortable. I don't think that this is all that everyone's making it out to be. I'm just surprised that he did it on a platform as large as Part of My Take.
Well, he doesn't do a lot of media, and I think you see why, given all the kerfuffle coming out of this. One, as far like the whole barking genesis of Georgia fans barking at people, that started as a meme because opposing fans said that Georgia did it and they didn't. And then Georgia fans have since decided to lean into it and say, well, yeah, we're going to own this and bark at you to make you feel uncomfortable. So like, yeah, Matt Stafford, a $400 million quarterback, should not be barking at people. And like, when I'm out and about in Athens and people shout "Go Dogs" at me as an alum of the University of Georgia, like, yeah, I never think in time to just say "Go Dogs" back. Like, it is a very like spur of the moment thing. And so I understand him sort of saying what he said about it. I think when he said he felt wildly uncomfortable, he was referring specifically to people barking about him, and it just got sort of cut up in translation there. Like you said earlier, I think that this is kind of much ado about nothing, but it was, I think, an interesting look into how Georgia fans, or at least some Georgia fans, feel about Matthew Stafford, because I think there are a lot of people that, again, he was only at Georgia for 3 years. The 2008 team is one of the more disappointing ones of, I think, the Georgia 21st century teams. I think they're certainly on the podium there. And, for him to go and have that kind of a season and still be the number one overall pick, I don't necessarily think that a lot of Georgia fans were in love with Matthew Stafford there. And because of the way that this has been presented and discussed, I think that there is a little bit of brushback there, and a little bit of people who feel like they have something that they can pounce on for feelings that they have long held against Matthew Stafford.
I also imagine that there was probably less barking at the time that Matt Stafford was quarterback, and it's only gotten more popular in recent years. So you probably have to make that adjustment. Like, what in the world is going on? I think we're
doing this now.
Yeah, exactly. Right. But I like I said, I'm probably not going to bark back, but I do feel like if you're going to do something, you got to go all in on it. If somebody's going to make fun of you for it, embrace it. Take it to the next level, elevate it, do your thing. And so when people make fun of Georgia for it, I'm just like, you know what? Like you said, you created the problem. Now we're just taking it and making it our own. But for someone like Matt Stafford, who's such a public figure and such a well-known quarterback, I can understand why you wouldn't want to necessarily reciprocate that, but more just give them like a little "Go Dogs." Just acknowledge it. Just acknowledge it.
Never forget what you are, because the rest of the world will surely for not. Wear it like an armor, and it can never be used to hurt you, would be advice there in that regard. But you, being a Kennesaw State Owl, if someone hooted at you, would you hoot back?
I would give them a little hooty hoo, or like a I'll always give back a hooty hoo every time. So I mean, I'm glad that we addressed it, because I mean, I guess Matt Stafford and his wife, they probably need a better PR team because of some things that have happened this year. But at the same time, I understand more so where he's coming from, and I feel like this is something that we can nip sooner rather than later. These are just the kind of things that, like, when we're waiting on football season and there's nothing to talk about and these little things come out, we blow them up so much because it's like we're so bored and we just need something to harp in on. I feel like that's what a lot of gossip is. Like, you're just waiting on the next thing to happen, so you got to focus on what you have in front of you.
Well, you had said a few weeks ago, though, that football was back.
It is on our televisions, not college football.
It's not back, Kaylee.
It is back. I watched the NFL preseason on Sunday.
If football were back, we wouldn't be talking about Matthew Stafford addressing Go Dogs and barking. We'd be talking about real football.
Okay. I don't know how to respond to that.
I'm taking that as a win.
Neutral. It's a draw. Okay, and that is going to be spilling the G. Connor, I'm actually terrified. What did you learn today?
I learned that if you hooty-hoo at Kaylee Mansell out in the streets, she will hooty hoo back. And so if you see her out and about, please do so.
No, please
I would love
do.
nothing more.
That would make my
That's
day.
what I said. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So I'm not going to give y'all what I learned today, other than the fact that Connor apparently is diminishing my pop culture knowledge. Doesn't think I have it in me, but he knows better than that. But I do want to highlight that we have high school football going on this week. So yes, football is back. We've got high school football going on the Peachtree Sports Network. Myself and Brandon Adams are a part of the call. We've got games tonight. When this airs, it'll be Prince Avenue and West Forsyth playing. And then we've got more tomorrow. And then we'll have 4 games in Mercedes-Benz on Saturday. So football, yes, is back. And if you're not doing anything, I encourage you to tune in and especially listen to Brandon on the call. Brandon does an amazing job in the play-by-play role. I don't think anybody understands how difficult that is to be able to keep up like that, especially with all the different players. So tune in, watch some high school football, then watch some NFL preseason on Sunday because football is back, and then we can all just wait it out until college football gets here. But I want to thank my wonderful co-host, Connor Riley, for joining me. Cody Chaffins, we miss you. To everyone in the booth, thank you so much for all you do. And to all of you that listen to our show each and every week, we really appreciate it. And we're so happy to have you here on DawgNation at Large. And we will see you next Thursday at 7 o'clock.